This week we talked about your relationship with your spouse and what a big subject that really is. Well, to continue in a little bit of what we talked about this weekend, I want to talk about communicating with your spouse. And a great verse to set the foundation for communication between husband and wife is found in the book of 1 Peter. Peter was one of Jesus' disciples, and Peter knew a lot about speaking before he thought because he was always sticking his foot in his mouth. And he learned a lot about communicating from Jesus himself. And so he writes this verse for us in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. It says, "Do not do wrong to repay a wrong, and do not insult to repay an insult, but repay with a blessing, because you yourselves were called to do this so that you might receive a blessing." Now think about that. That's a mouthful, because whenever somebody says something mean to us or sarcastic to us or hurtful to us, what do we want to do? We immediately want to give it right back in their face. That's just human nature. But he said that if you want to learn to communicate properly, and in the context of 1 Peter 3, he was talking to husbands and wives. He says, you don't end an argument by getting in the last word. He said, you don't end an argument by winning the argument, so to speak, but he said, rather, you win when you don't return the insult, but rather you return a blessing. He said that you were designed to receive a blessing. And you know what he meant by that? Is that good communication and kind words in communication between husband and wife, that we were designed to hear that. Husbands, listen, your wife is dying to hear kind, uplifting words from you. She's dying to communicate with you. Wives, you may not know this, but your husband is greatly impacted by the power of your words. Now, your husband may not talk as much as you do. He may not have as many words in a day as you do, but the truth is, you greatly impact him with your words. You can either tear him down or you can build him up. Husbands, you can either tear your wife down or you can build her up. Well, what Peter was telling us here was that men and women need to learn to communicate with each other. Now, you probably are aware that men and women communicate differently. And that's not a curse, that's a design by God. So don't be angry over that or upset over that or even confused over that. But learn that if you're going to communicate in a marriage setting, there are just a few principles you got to get down. And number one is this: you need to communicate clearly. I found a lot of times that when it comes to communication in marriage that we don't communicate clearly. We just kind of are vague about our expectations, and then we're upset when our spouse doesn't meet our expectations. Maybe this is kind of a common one. Maybe ladies, instead of directly asking your husband to take out the trash, you just kind of hint about it. Like, in the middle of when he's watching television, you put your hands on your hips and you sigh, and like, I sure do wish somebody would take out the trash. And your husband's like, so do I. Well, if you're going to communicate clearly, and then communicate directly. Don't be vague about it. Communicate directly. If you want your husband to be home at 6 o'clock because of some special event you've got planned or some special meal or whatever, don't just say, hey, be home tonight. Tell him exactly what time. That way we communicate in a far more effective way. And then you've got to communicate positively. We've already seen in 1 Peter chapter 3 that when we communicate, that we need to communicate with words that uplift, and we communicate with words that are a blessing. That's the last thought. You need to communicate a blessing to your spouse. Kind words, building up, being thankful, saying what you appreciate about your spouse will go a long way in helping the communication in your marriage. Well, I hope tonight that you will communicate with each other in your small group. Talk about how you communicate best, how you receive communication best, and I believe it'll be a real blessing to your family.